Hi, everybody. Happy to see everyone on this webinar with Ben Kaplan. I'm really excited about this event because I've been with Ben, and you, Ben, might not remember that, but I've met first time you at Angel Hack, where you were talking about marketing techniques, and I still remember how well you presented this some complex emotional things in marketing with your awesome presentation when a guy was holding a girl and you were changing the perspective of this scene, and it was amazing.
Sure.
Probably
okay. Thank you. And that's amazing that years later you remember the actual presentation. So that's what, of course, you're adding the pressure to this webinar right as we speak. That's okay. I can handle it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's amazing how I still remember that. I've seen after those years, I've seen like thousands of presentations. I work a lot with startups, and this one I remember. Seriously.
Okay, amazing. Thank you.
So today we're gonna speak on a very important topic during the crisis period around the world. For startups, it is a challenge, but it's a huge opportunity. And talking about pivots and how to apply pivots, how to do pivots in your companies, I think is one of the fundamental questions right now. And for this reason, I invited Ben to talk about pivots in your companies and how you can apply this in your different businesses you have. So I want to have a conversation. Please prepare your questions. After Ben finishes his presentation, I encourage you to ask questions, and I'm really hoping that it will bring value to your business already now. A quick update about our community. We are a non-profit global community for English-speaking entrepreneurs, helping entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs to connect globally, to get access to global capital, customers, and like-minded people. Despite we are a free community, we have some expectations to the members. We expect that you will be active on our community, and most importantly, you will be helping each other. This is what I learned in Silicon Valley, where people are ready to help each other without asking anything in return. And this exactly value I'm bringing to our global community. Briefly about our team, we are 4 months old community. We are very baby community, though we already have over 30 people on our team around the world, building our community locally. And we already have over 1,000 founders, entrepreneurs on our community globally from most of the countries around the world. It's amazing because we don't have any marketing budget. We don't have any financial support or wherever. There is even no monetization model in our community. We are entrepreneurs who are helping entrepreneurs. And this is what people really see the benefit and value. And I see many cases where one entrepreneur in one country helped the entrepreneur in the other country, and there is some business activity happening on international scale. This is what cases we see, and we want those cases to be happening more and more. Our past events, we had Steve Hoffman talking about 10 Commandments of Raising Capital in Silicon Valley. We had Mikita Mikada presenting, Ilyas Tribulaev from Stanford, Bill Riker, Donna Griffith, Bob Dorff recently speaking, and we had a live pitch to global investors recently. And it's just a quick snapshot of a few events we had. We had lots of great speakers like Ben Kaplan, and all those people are coming with one simple mission to help entrepreneurs around the world, wherever you are, wherever resources you have, just to help you to take a next step. So please use this opportunity. Our next event that will happen tomorrow with Daria White. She will be talking, she will have a webinar in Russian for Russian-speaking audience. She will talk about legal insights of how to do negotiations with corporations. And the other webinar in Russian as well for Russian-speaking audience will be next week with an entrepreneur who is living in Siberia, but he runs a business in 18 countries around the world. So it's a very interesting case, and he'll share it with you. This Friday, we will have Go Global World Monthly Founders Meetup. So entrepreneurs from around the world connect and network. And this is where the magic happens. Basically, you may find peers from different parts of the world who are willing to help you to bring your business to their markets or help you with something else. So you also can help them. So I really encourage you to join this event. It's every first Friday of the month. So this one will be happening this Friday. Next one will be happening next month. So just make sure you are there. It's going to be awesome. If you like our events, you want to join and see these amazing speakers like Ben or others, just scan this QR code and we'll be happy to see you on our next events. Quickly about our partners. Ben represents a company PR Hacker, and Ben, you just mentioned the other company. I know that you are not involved only with PR Hacker. I think there is another one.
Sure.
Feel free to mention it. We have IT Park in Uzbekistan, Skolkovo Techno Park in Russia, Moscow School of Management in Russia, GSD Venture Studios, American Venture Studios, Rus-based, Startup News in India, IB Consultant in US, Embry Riddle Aeronautical University in Florida, Mindhive in Australia, Axis Innovation in Israel, Collaborativa in Mexico, Expert Dojo in Los Angeles. And how to join our community is very simple. Just find us on Facebook, Go Global World, or scan this QR code. Then find a group of your country. This group is connected. We have about 90 groups connected to our global page, and you can find your local community, like in Estonia, Mongolia, or wherever, Australia, wherever you are. We are building local communities as well. If you want to be connected with with our global network and be able to chat with them, so find on Facebook Go Global World Chat, and or scan this QR code, and you'll be able to ask questions, help, and wherever you want to build your network. The same chat we have for audience who are using Telegram. It's called also Go Global World, and we have a chat connected there. And we are on LinkedIn. Find Go Global World. Basically, that's it. This video with Ben will be posted on our YouTube channel. As I mentioned a minute ago, we don't have any budget, so every like, share, subscription is helping us to be found in search engines, and more entrepreneurs from different parts, remote locations where they have less opportunity can find us and benefit from this content we create for free. And on my end, that's it. If you want to reach out to us, just info@goglobalworld. Info@goglobal.world. One last thing. I know Ben for quite a while, and he's an amazing expert in marketing. Probably one of the best people in marketing I know, and his expertise is really like unique. Please use this opportunity to connect with Ben, because Ben is probably, I mean, not probably, but definitely a global entrepreneur with lots of unique expertise. Ben, the word is, the floor is yours. So please continue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Daniil. And hello, everyone. And I'm going to share my screen in just a second, but welcome to Pivot, Don't Pause, How to Grow a Company During a Crisis. And one of the things this is based on, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, just because always helpful when you take advice from anyone to know their perspective. And I always like to say, be careful who you take advice from, but be patient with those who give it. And so a little bit about my perspective and why I put together this presentation. First of all, before I started running the agencies and the marketing agencies I run now, I was actually a case writer at Harvard Business School. And I was basically writing cases for HBS for the two main venture capital professors. And one of the things from that I learned how to do was analyze all of the academic research, look at studies that happened on different periods of economic growth. And as the pandemic and COVID-19 hit this time, what I wanted to do was go back and look at the past 4 economic crises. Look at the companies that are the top performers. Really, it was the top 9% of companies that not only survived a crisis, but thrived in a crisis, used it to become a market leader, grow faster than they were before, start to dominate an industry. And look at those cases and try to find the common truths between those 4 crises over a period of many years. And so that's what this presentation is. This is the culmination of about 2 months of work looking at all of those lessons and then applying it to the current situation. So if that sounds good, I'm going to jump in. Daniil, is that what you expected?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, then let's start. Let me share my screen, and here the presentation is called Pivot Don't Pause: How to Grow a Company During a Crisis. I'll go to full screen mode, and just as a little bit of background about me and sort of how I approach things and how I think about the world. The first thing is that it starts with this book. So that is actually me on the cover. I hope it doesn't deter anyone from actually reading the book. But that is a book I wrote right out of university called How to Go to College Almost for Free. It was a guide to going to universities in the US or around the world by winning college scholarships. And I didn't know what I was doing at the time with writing a book. I wrote the book, originally self-published it before I sold it to a large publisher. And we had to figure out how do we grow this thing? How do we virally market this thing and manage to sell 2.5 million copies of this book at the beginning from my parents' garage, and then eventually throughout the world, trying to look at what were the causes for ideas to spread. So one, I'm a viral marketer. I have an agency that does this, but that's kind of part of my perspective on the world. And then after that, maybe, and Daniil, I don't know if you've heard of this program. I was in a program called Startup Chile in Santiago, Chile, in South America. And I was the pitch trainer for Startup Chile. So at the time, I was the guy who people came to my sessions. I would listen to their elevator pitch and I would critique it. And I actually got my start as an agency because I would say, you know what, we ought to do a quick PR campaign for you. We ought to do a quick digital campaign for you, get some users, get some traction. It'll be way easier to raise money from investors. So I got my start doing these campaigns in 50 countries around the world. And Daniil, it looks like you have some familiarity with Startup Chile.
Yeah. I have many friends who attended this Startup Village and Startup Chile. And I mean, people have good positive feedback, and people liked also being in South America.
Okay. Oh yeah, there you go. Of course. So I was, I had this job of hundreds of startups would come to my sessions and would be like, okay, we need to help you raise $3 million, next month. What can we do right now to get you some more traction, to get you some potential funding? And so that's kind of my perspective in the world. One, as a marketer, and two, as someone trying to help launch companies, help fundraise for companies. And then finally, last little bit about me, and then it's going to be all about you and your startups. So since then, I formed what is called TOP, which stands for Test, Optimize, Perform. It's a network of agencies around the world. We're best known for an agency called PR Hacker, where we have different sort of hacks to get earned media coverage and PR faster. But there's many other agencies, and we have people, over 100 people in 20 countries around the world. And we have agencies like Top Data, which is entirely focused on market research and data for marketing purposes to become a thought leadership quickly. Or we have other agencies in certain verticals like Top Health or Top Finance or Top Tech. These are all agencies that are full service marketing agencies that we have around the world. And these are some of the places where we work on the ground. Probably at some point, Daniil, I'm going to need your help to add Moscow to the list. Not yet, but we're working in many places around the world. And then finally, these are some of the scrappy startups we work with. We grew up with and helped a lot of companies that came through Y Combinators or Techstars or 500 startups, companies like Postmates and food delivery. And then also really big brands like Budweiser, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Mercedes are all of our clients. And with that being said, let me jump in. So that's enough about me. And let's talk about 4 financial recessions and specifically what we can learn from it. And here's the 4 we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about 2008, the Great Recession, most recent kind of financial slowdown really precipitated by kind of crisis in like the real estate market. We're going to talk about the 2000 dot-com bubble. So if some of you were around back then, very difficult time for startups, tech companies, obviously dot-com companies there. We're going to talk about what were the top performers and why did they succeed. Third, we're going to talk about the slowdown. And then fourth, the decline. There was different causes for these economic crises. One was related to kind of like energy problems in the world. Others related to kind of political issues. And so these were 4 financial crises. They all had different causes. But what I would argue is that they're very similar to our current pandemic and current crisis, not in the cause. This is a very different cause, this is a health-related one. But in the impact on companies and how you have to think, they're actually all quite similar, and they're quite similar to the current situation. So that being said, here's the first question we need to answer, which is, which companies significantly outperformed their rivals and why? And what we're looking for is companies that essentially outperform their industry by at least 10%. This is really significant because during a crisis, 85% of market leaders at the beginning of a crisis are no longer market leaders at the end. That's amazing when you think about it, right? More than 8 out of 10 of the market leaders, when we started all of this craziness in like February, March, by the time we finish up and the economy fully recovers, they will not be a market leader at the end. So what this means is, number one, if you're a challenger company, you're not the incumbent, this is an incredible opportunity, right? In the next 2, 3, 4 years, you have a chance to become a market leader. That's amazing. Or maybe you are the market leader now. Okay, in that case, this is your opportunity to defend your position and be not one of those companies that loses their position. So let's look more closely at sort of the types of companies and the types of strategies they follow. So there's basically 3 strategic focus approaches that companies take during a crisis. We can categorize them into 3 types. The first is prevention focused. So the first is prevention focused companies seek to cut costs faster and deeper than their rivals. These are the companies that have the biggest layoffs. These are the companies that are the most defensive. These are the companies that would say like, okay, we're not doing any more deals, no more partnerships. We're not signing any contracts. We are simply, preventing worse things from happening. We are exclusively in defensive cut cost mode. That's company type number 1. Company type, and if you look at the past 4 crises, there's about a 21% chance of post-crisis success if you are purely defensive. That means about 1 out of 5 in terms of what we mean by success is full recovery to where you were before the crisis. About 1 in 5 being 100% defensive when the crisis ends will be at just as strong as they were before. So that's strategy number 1. Strategy number 2, so promotion focused. Promotion-focused companies do the opposite. So they just invest. They're like, everyone's cutting costs. We're going to double down. So they boldly invest much more than their rivals. These kind of companies have a 26% chance of post-crisis success. So all things being equal, if you had to choose between being purely defensive or very hyperly offensive, you actually would pick the offensive side. But still, 21%, 26%, now you got a 1 in 4 chance of post-crisis success. Now let's look at the final, which is kind of progressive or dual focus, what I call. These kind of companies combine defensive moves with strategic offensive amplification. Essentially, they're doing both. In some ways, they're cutting costs, reducing things, being defensive, but in other ways, they're investing, they're being aggressive, they're being offensive. It's a combination strategy. And if you look at these companies, if you have this combination of defensive and offensive, suddenly, if you look at the past 4 recessions, your chances of post-crisis success jumps to 37%, right? So we went from 21 for defensive percent, 26 from offensive, now at 37 if you kind of do both. And what I would argue is that specifically what you are defensive about and what you are offensive about and how you are defensive or offensive actually can raise that percentage even further. So this is, the companies overall that took the dual focus approach. But what about if it's if you pick the right things to be defensive or offensive? So these top 9% of companies are what I call the crisis conquerors. These are the ones that not only survive, but thrive in a crisis. And the question is, to have this dual focus lens, to be progressive, to be in the top 9% of overall performers, what do you have to do? And we're going to look at that closely. So, Daniil, just to pause for a second, does that surprise you? You know, kind of the stats on that. These are the past 4 recessions. I think it will apply to the pandemic down. Are you surprised that this like pure defensive is actually the least optimal?
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. I mean, it's very interesting to see this kind of statistics combined all together for a couple of crises. And yeah.
Okay, so we'll look at it more closely, but I think the first thing, if you're watching, and whenever I attend these webinars, when I'm a participant, I'm always like, what is the one thing that I'm going to remember? You know, and at least one of the first things from this first part is I would say that you need a combination of defensive and offensive strategies. And there's incredible opportunities now, but you need to be strategic in both. And we're going to look at what is the nature of those strategies that you need. So here's what it looks like. This is the 2008 recession. I picked the most recent one. And this is essentially the period of downturn, which is initially, which you can see all 3 experience, whether you're a crisis conqueror, you're promotion focused or prevention focused, everyone kind of goes down, usually right away. And then it starts to have recovery, and then eventually growth. The difference is you can see that these companies that had a combination of the right defensive and offensive strategies, their curves higher. They're actually increasing, right? It's a steeper curve versus those companies that were offensive, actually, you know, a little bit better than those who were purely defensive. You can see their growth rate. So all companies kind of, you know, returned, grew again. There was a light at the end of the tunnel. But if you're a crisis conqueror, it's a steeper growth. And the idea is that those companies outperform their rivals in their industry by at least 10%. So let's talk about 6 ways to pivot and conquer, and specifically the things that these crisis conquerors did that you can do now. And the reason I call this presentation Pivot, Don't Pause is that so many startup companies, so many growing companies, so many more established companies, they had this notion of we need to pause, we need to stop. And what I would argue is actually like the term that's used, you know, that kind of comes from sort of the kind of the lean startup methodology, which is the term pivot. We actually just need to pivot and adjust. And if we pivot and adjust correctly, we can conquer. Let's talk about the 6 things you can do right now if you want to grow your business, even during the pandemic. So point number 1 is cut costs without sacrificing the future. So the number 1 criteria of crisis conquerors is that when they were defensive, and they reduced costs, but they did it in the right way. And here's the right way. The right way to cut costs during a crisis is to improve technology, systems, tools. It could be labor, man and women power as well. But the idea is that you gain in efficiency through cutting costs. The wrong way to do it in a crisis is just to chop off costs. Like purely, we just need to cut costs. And so we laid off X number of people. The reason that is a suboptimal strategy, especially during a crisis, is that the problem is eventually to grow, you have to hire all of those people back. And you're essentially just as efficient as you are before. So instead, the companies that were most successful essentially were able to develop more efficiencies, more effectiveness, more productivity during a crisis. They had to still cut costs, but then when everything recovered, they were a more efficient company. They were a more efficient brand. They delivered everything more efficiently, productively, and effectively. And so then suddenly they had an edge on their rivals. And so everything we can do right now is all about thinking about, you know, what are systems, processes, and procedures? Let me give you an example from our agencies. And again, I'm the CEO of Top Global. We're a marketing agency that's worldwide. We have 11 kind of, children agencies within that network. And here's one thing we're doing. Right now, we are investing in a lot of development of our marketing tools and resources. So for our PR division, for instance, we have our own media CRM that tracks 1 million different media contacts around the world. We have developers right now investing in that because it allows us to, for instance, track what is the best day of week and time of day to, pitch a producer for CNBC to get your business featured on, CNBC Power Lunch. So what we're doing right now is actually improving our core marketing system that delivers PR. It allows us for our sort of account managers who have clients to actually more efficiently process media contacts that are going to be the right fit. And then not only does this save us cost now, because we're actually able to not require as many people to do just list building and media building. But then once we come from this crisis, then suddenly, because of our investment now, we have an edge over every other PR agency because of the efficiency in which we can target communications at exactly the right person at exactly the right time. So that's one example for us. But what else? Standard operating procedures. That might be another. So have you taken the time for all of the critical processes of your business to write down step 1, step 2, step 3, train people on those processes, use tools or technology or automation to improve them? That's another way. So that's point number 1, which is cut costs by gaining efficiency, not just reducing bottom line dollars. And if you gain efficiency simultaneously with cutting costs, then suddenly you have a total edge on the competition when the pandemic resolves. So Daniil, any questions on that or questions for the crowd? I'm happy to answer them as we go through. I know we have some time at the end, but that's point number 1, cut costs the smart way.
No questions. I think people are just focused on listening.
Okay, sounds good. So that's point number 1. Second pivot during a crisis to become a crisis conqueror is invest in the drivers of growth. So we've been defensive, we've been protective up to this point. We were cutting costs, but we were doing it in a strategic way by increasing efficiency. Now, let's talk about what are the drivers of growth. And there are actually 3 recession growth drivers. And this is across the past 4 recessions. These are things that essentially, if you invest in these things, then you have an edge over the competition, both in the short term and the long term. So let's look at them one by one. The first is research and development, R&D. The reason crisis conquerors invest in R&D, even during a crisis, is it allows you to often innovate in a way that competitors will not match. Why? Because they're too busy surviving the crisis. In addition to that, R&D and releasing new products or new features or new lines of products or new brands, there's an advantage that is a little bit surprising with launching in a crisis when you look back at the past 4 recessions. And that is sometimes new products or new innovations launched in a crisis actually have a lot less competition. Why? Because everyone else is in defensive mode. So that bigger player that would normally kind of squash you when you kind of entered their market has taken their eye off the ball. So the one thing I could say right now that's universally true of the 1980, 90, 2000, 2008 recession is that the top performing companies continue to invest in research and development. So if you're a hardware manufacturer, right? Sometimes research and development is you're actually building stuff. If you're a service provider, that might just mean you're gonna, kind of double down on a new line of business, a new set of services, right? Maybe, you kind of played in the space where you were doing, the technical side, and now you want to move into the marketing side or other things. So essentially, research and development that expands your business offerings tends to overperform during crisis. The second recession growth driver is marketing. And crisis conquerors tended to overinvest in marketing compared to their rivals, but in a strategic way. And that is marketing channels where essentially you could get short-term benefits. You could market now and you could still sort of mitigate the downturn in terms of results. but essentially marketing that keeps you top of mind with your target audience. So when you emerge from the crisis, you're the first call they make. So right now is a unique opportunity, and Daniil, I do another webinar, we can do this later, that's actually focused on crisis marketing. And one of the crisis marketing tips, and one of the specific crisis marketing things you can do is essentially right now, engagement and participation in digital marketing is through the roof. What it means is that across our clients, and this is like clients like in 20 countries around the world, this is clients in every imaginable industry, their open rates on email up about 50% across the board. Why? There's a lot more people at home, consuming, digital media, right? So one, we're seeing about 50% increase in open rates. And two, if you're looking at click-through rates, depending on industry, it's anywhere between 60 and 80% up across the board. So if I would have told you before this pandemic, Daniil, and I was like, okay, coming up later this year, there's going to be this period, and get this, all of your open rates are going to go up 50%. All of your click-throughs that you need for whatever you're driving towards for your business, it's going to go up 60 to 80%. I was like, this is all coming. What should you do? You'd be like, we need to double down on our marketing. Like, this is awesome. Yes, I'm going to plan for this. So this has actually happened. It just happened in a surprising and strange and really unfortunate way because of the pandemic, but this is a real opportunity. So if you look across the board, the companies that overperformed invested in marketing, continued to invest in marketing during the crisis, and reaped short-term gains, but also longer-term results because they built up thought leadership. They stayed top of mind. They demonstrated their value. And then suddenly, at some point down the line, suddenly all those companies that are like, we're not signing deals, the preventative companies are suddenly like, okay, we're back in this. We're signing deals. And if you're top of mind at that point, and if you were marketing, you're likely to be, then you're the one who get the deals. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I actually would choose an aggressive strategy to invest in getting some more customers during crisis.
Okay, there you go. And we can talk about it. And I think there's a little point we could discuss maybe in the Q&A about what is different when you market during a crisis is you need to identify the psychological profile of your target audience, which is different than normally you're like, who's our persona, right? Like, what's the persona I'm trying to reach? Or it's like, oh, what industry verticals am I trying to reach? Or like, is it, I'm marketing to these use cases. And it's not that those are not significant, but the issue is that during a crisis, the psychological profile of the person making the decision becomes even more relevant. What I mean is that you could have a person that is the right persona, that is in the right industry vertical, that does have the right use case, but they're like a preventative company. They're in total defensive mode. And no matter what you do at this moment, they're not going to do a business deal. Versus you can have another potential target that is not the ideal in all those ways, but they're in the mindset of we need to invest. We need to be aggressive. And you can do the deal with them, or even the dual focus lens. You can do the deal with them if you can demonstrate of how this is strategically important to them. So that's another discussion, but marketing is a key driver. And what's a little bit different is you got to understand the psychological makeup of your target audience. Third recession growth driver is asset investment. So asset investment, essentially during a crisis, assets can be had for less money, for cheaper than they normally are. So what are the critical assets of your business? If you're like making stuff, that can actually be, like actual manufacturing and plants. That could be contracts with other people who manufacture, meaning you have a chance to lock in something at a lower price now that's going to save you later. If you are a services business, that could be people even, right? Like now is a fantastic time to like actually, lots of people have been laid off. Lots of freelancers need work. This is a time to actually get people on board, and maybe that can be done at a less expensive rate right now because of the need for more work. So whatever your business is, basically crisis conquerors can accumulate assets during a crisis. They find a way to do it, and that gives them strategic advantages later. Here's a classic example. And this is, you might not have these, I don't know if you have these brands in Russia, for those of you who are watching from Moscow, but let me give you an example of US brands. Maybe you've seen them and encountered them. Daniil, since you live in the States, maybe you've seen Staples versus Office Depot. This is like an office supply store, right? Staples versus Office Depot, two very similar, right? It's like you want to get some stuff for your office, you go there and you buy it. Now, in the 2008 recession, Staples invested in assets. What that means is they improved their distribution, they improved their warehouses, they grabbed all those things. Office Depot did not. What happens as you come out of that is basically Staples totally lowers their cost point of view for by all of the assets they have. And they just outperform across the board. That was one, but they also did R&D and marketing, Office Depot. Essentially two identical types of sort of retail stores, totally different based on that. So asset investment as well. So just to sum up, R&D, can you innovate? Can you develop? Can you invest in that now and come out with potentially new products or new features or new services? Marketing, can you target those with the psychological profile to do business now, but at the same time, stay top of mind with those who won't do business now, but will once we recover so that you capture those deals. And third, asset investment, can you accumulate critical assets for your business at a lower rate now because it's a crisis, because it's a pandemic, because prices are down, and use that to fuel your growth later? Those are the 3 recession growth drivers. Any thoughts or comments or questions, Daniil or the audience?
No questions yet, but I mean, like these drivers, in my opinion, are the things that open some eyes for early stage entrepreneurs or who are in crisis. And I completely agree where these 3 drivers are critical. Just completely support that.
Right. So if you're a CEO or you're a founder, or you're helping, kind of manage or run a company, what have we learned so far? Just like, I mean, if you're just going to take away one thing, you got a checklist with 4 things on it, right? It's like cut costs, but by becoming more efficient. And that's defensive. And then you got 3 offensive. And you're like, okay, I need to look for R&D investment, marketing investment, and asset accumulation. And those are essentially all 3 aggressive things you can do now that not only help you in the short term and let you benefit, but actually help you in the long term in the recovery. And that's what turns your growth curve from this to this, those 4 things. Okay. Brings us to pivot number 3.
Yeah, one question.
Yeah.
So that's from me. One of the many entrepreneurs I see in Russia, CIS, and other countries. I mean, they start working with like one large customer, and during crisis, this customer just stopped paying, and they have they just lose their like revenue streams. And just yesterday they were like growing company and making money, and right now they just almost out of business. But because of just losing this customer, they didn't manage to get more customers like that. And I just see many cases like this. What would you recommend those companies who just immediately lost their revenue streams?
Okay. So first of all, what you got to do is first you just got to survive, right? Before you can do anything else, you just got to survive. So you got to find a way. Usually what you have to do is you have to identify early on, is that customer of a psychological mindset that they're a preventative company, that they are just like, you've got to diversify from them. And if that's the case, you have to find simple ways to do it. And you've got to look at other possible ways to monetize your business in the short term, even if that is not your long-term goal. So I know a ton of like software companies or hardware companies or tech companies where it's like, we make stuff, but you know what? It's a crisis and we're going to become a services company, right? We're going to we're usually, building our own tech, our own app, but right now we've got to survive. So we're going to help build some apps for other people right now because we have to. Right? So first thing you got to do is to survive, and you might have to diversify just to survive. But even as you do that, you actually need to look for now, part of the problem probably initially was you were dependent on one customer, right? So you've got to then go look and say, we got to diversify this. We have to find an easy way to do this. Who are the people who are willing to do deals now in business deals? What are their characteristics? And how can I find a way to get them started quickly? So the other thing you got to do is you got to just like find a way to do a deal with them, right? So it might be like, okay, it's not going to be huge profit right now, but we've got to get in the door. We've got to find a way to diversify. So everything is about survival. You might do some things that are not, you wouldn't normally focus on, but that diversification of client becomes important. And there's a rule of thumb, which is you just don't want any one client or customer to be responsible for more than 20% of your revenue, right? Which is the kind of the rule I go by. So you just don't want, and it's easier said than done, right? When you land the kind of like a big fish, and you're like, man, this is great. But I've seen a ton of companies where they became a much better company once they actually lost their big customer, because it forced them to actually like look into opportunities in the market and have a better product market fit. So that's there's no easy answers, but that's the first one. Survive first and do whatever it takes to survive. And then even as you do that, find a way to invest in those drivers of growth.
Yeah, thank you. And it's similar, actually. It's also the answers a comment from Valery Elizov. He says like, yeah, this is all right, provided that you have lots of cash to spend on expanding. So I guess this
well, there's that, but what I would say is cash is one thing, but what you need is you need like a form of currency that you can leverage. So, for instance, usually for most things, whether it's either you can invest cash or you can invest time, right? So if it's difficult for you to invest in growth drivers right now, like marketing or like R&D, because you don't have the cash, you've got to find ways to do it, but kind of being clever and nimble about it, right? So maybe you can't invest in the kind of R&D that you would ordinarily need to hire a certain person, or go on get a certain company involved, or spend money to do it. If you don't have money now, if you have time, you've got to figure out a way to do it. So what that would mean is maybe there's a trade, there's a barter, there's something else that you can do for someone else that gets you access to something. Maybe with marketing, you can't do paid advertising right now, but you could do, with a little bit of time, some sort of strategic PR, earned media work to be top of mind with like the 40 journalists that most influence your field. So it's always a trade-off between sort of time and money, but that's a normal startup thing. That's just like a bootstrap startup thing you got to do, right? You never have enough money. And in fact, I mean, here's another thing that I know from looking at the academic literature back when I was at Harvard Business School. Companies that get too much funding don't do well either, right? They have too much funding, too much resources, so they actually rely on that, and they don't actually get to where they need to go any faster. It can be a detriment as well. So normal startup thing, I know easier said than done, but if money is a limiting factor, then how can you invest time to get similar results? And that brings us to, I think if we jump back in, pivot number 3, which also relates to time, but in a different way, which is time shift ahead of your competitors. So some of the advantage that occurs during a recession is essentially being a first mover during each phase of the recession. So what that means is when it's time to be defensive and cut costs, you got to cut costs sooner. Why? Because if you cut costs sooner, then you've reserved more kind of funds or cash or just ability to invest into the other things sooner. So that means you can invest in R&D or marketing or asset accumulation sooner. That means you can get those deals before your competitors, and you can start your growth rate sooner. So one of the key points that you see about crisis conquerors, and again, this top sort of 9% of companies that outperform their industry, is that they're making decisions faster. So if you're lagging, saying like, I'm not sure if I need to do this cost-cutting strategy, but I don't know, let's wait a month, it's too slow. If you're saying like, we're investing in this R&D, we could come out with a new product, but maybe we just like take a couple months more and sort of improve it a bit, too slow. So some of the advantage you get in a crisis is there's so much chaos, there's so much disruption, that if you sort of think like, what is the pace that your competitors are doing these things, and we have to outperform them in that speed, that's where a lot of the advantage comes. Can you be defensive faster than they can be defensive? Can you be offensive faster than they can be offensive? Can you be strategic in the strategic ways you need to be? So be very aware of that, and universally time shift. And if you can, and in a crisis, things happen fast, right? So things happen like, things are different 2 to 3 weeks from now than it is from now. So a few weeks can make a difference in changing your trajectory. Brings us to pivot number 4. Stay top of mind with your top customers and leads. This relates a little bit to your question, Daniil, earlier about like what happens, if you lost your one big customer.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's not, it could be, I know people that didn't lose one, like they had 5 and they lost 4 out of the 5, right? So, or they're not paying their bills right now, or they're cutting back what they were doing. So what I would say is a common characteristic of the crisis conquerors is that they understand who are their most important customers, most important clients, most important consumers, and they stay top of mind with those people. So what I would argue is, for that friend of yours, if that company obviously is an important top customer, even now, even when there's difficulty, you've got to stay top of mind. And that can be with checking in with them. That can be with content you produce. That can be with thought leadership. That can be like doing webinars like this. Whatever it is, understand who are the people, and who are the companies, and who are the partners, and who are the customers that are the key drivers of your business. And no matter what happens, stay top of mind. Stay top of mind. And I actually think that's one thing a lot of people don't realize, that just staying top of mind, if you do nothing else, that has a huge ROI. So what does staying top of mind mean? That just means like, I for instance, when I do a webinar, when I do it for my agency, Top Global or PR Hacker, I know that actually 80% of the business I generate never comes from the people who attend the webinar. It's just from people who saw that I was doing a webinar and said, oh yeah, okay, I'm staying top of mind. Oh, Ben Kaplan is out there, he's got an agency and he's doing really innovative stuff with marketing. So what will happen is, those kind of people won't attend the webinar, they won't respond to the webinar or anything, but 4 months later, I'll get an email saying, hey, Ben, the time is right. We actually need to do some viral marketing. We need to build buzz for this new product, and what is the reason? It's because we were top of mind, because we were constantly there. So it's underrated, just like, it doesn't even matter what your marketing is, just having something that causes your name to come up and just to remember you're there has huge dividends. And Daniil, have you ever had that in any of your businesses or entrepreneur work, where just like, you did something that was not so much like what you were marketing to them that they wanted, but just you were just like around, and then someone sought you out because they said, oh, I need to talk to you, simply because you stayed top of mind?
You know how I call it? I use the same similar strategy. I call it, when there is chaos around you, and you don't know what to do, create opportunities around you. So you see what else, what exactly you can do right now for yourself, for your business, for your customers. And maybe it's not even requested, but you do this, you do some even speaking like this is creating an opportunity that will be a potential trigger for you to be an expert in certain field, or people just can contact you for business inquiries or something else. You don't know what can happen, but you're just creating an opportunity.
Sure. I actually call this the table hockey principle.
Uh-huh.
Do you ever, you play with the table, the hockey, there where you kind of have the sticks and you kind of, we used to have one of those in university, me and my roommates, my best friends. And we had this principle from table hockey. This is appropriate to a Russian audience of hockey fans, I guess. And so what would happen is the puck would be in a position on that table where there was no way to score, right? If you shot for the goal, just the position of all the players, there was no way you could score. But you still took the shot. The reason was, you take the shot and usually the puck would bounce off in an unpredictable way. And then sometimes it would open up an actual shot that you could actually score with, right? Yeah. So there was value in taking the shot. And what I actually think with some of this with staying top of mind is, you got to take a lot of shots. You got to kind of have a lot of reasons for people to want to engage with you. And then if you do that, to use your terminology, Daniil, good things happen, right? It creates an opportunity for something good, something unexpected to happen. But if you just say, I'm not going to take that shot, I'm going to wait for that perfect shot, it's oftentimes a lot harder. It's often a lot harder because you're going to be slower. Versus if you take the shot, it's going to rebound in different ways, and then you create an opportunity sooner.
I agree completely. And you know, taking no decision is also a decision. So if you're not doing anything, it's your decision as well. So it means like you're not willing to move forward, and the outcome of it is your result. I think it's also this.
Right, absolutely. And I would say another way, I would say, is fortune favors the bold. But why does fortune favor the bold? Because it allows you to create more opportunities faster and to learn faster from experience. And as a result, more opportunities, more shots, higher, greater chance of success. Brings us to one point I want to mention at this, which is that the stay-at-home economy has led to more people playing games online, shopping online, learning new things online, streaming movies at home. If any of these areas are in some ways related to your business, there is fantastic opportunity now. So at the time that a crisis or a recession or a pandemic is very difficult, a lot of businesses contracting, what you have to also look at is there any way that you can tap into what are the emerging economies, industries, the ones that are doing well? And obviously, you know, for instance, we're doing this webinar on Zoom right now. You know, Zoom's doing pretty well right now, right? Despite some of their challenges, a few like challenges with security, a few other things, they're doing well because there's a need for their product. So as you do this and as you stay top of mind with your top customers and leads, also think strategically about how can you tap into the markets that are really booming, and these kind of markets and these kind of areas. And that's why I call this the stay-at-home economy. It's a little bit different because everyone's staying at home. Those are all opportunities for a higher proportion of businesses that will do deals right now. And so you may have to, if you're at all related to these industries, and again, there's a lot of them, these are just a few, like, right, playing games online, shopping online, learning online, streaming movies or entertainment, all of these kind of things are things, if you can be related to those fields and customers, this might be a great time, for instance, to do some R&D so that you can tap into these kind of industries or economies. Brings us to number 5, which is target those who can do business now. I've talked a lot about like investing for the short and long term. Long term is where you get the sustained growth, but short term is where you survive. Short term is where you've got to find those businesses who can do business now. And so this point, which I touched on earlier, is that in a crisis, industry segmentation may be less relevant than a psychological segmentation that takes into consideration a decision maker's emotional reactions to the economic environment. So you've got to do this quickly. And maybe you're in a kind of business where, like, how do I figure out, you know, where someone is? One of the simplest things you could do is ask. So if you're checking in with someone, like a potential business lead or a business partner or a contact, I mean, it can be as simple as in an email, or, you know, if you're talking to them verbally or in a Zoom call, you're like, hey, you know, how's business going now? Are you guys in total defensive mode, just like, you know, batten down the hatches, or are you emerging from that right now? Right? And if people are saying, yeah, we're cutting things, we're looking for more ways to cut, you know, we're in defensive mode, then you know that's a psychological profile that maybe they could be a top customer, like you need to stay top of mind, but that's just not someone who's going to do business right now. And then if they say, you know, oh, you know, yeah, we were like that, but, you know, now we're looking at doing a little bit more and this and this and this, then immediately you've got to think, okay, is this someone that is, you know, sort of, a promoter, which means they're doing aggressive across the board, or do they have that dual focus lens? What are the things that they're strategically investing in? How do we fit those things? How can we make a case that we're part of it? So this is this is not a new process in that any good salesperson thinks about things from the point of view of the person they're trying to sell to. However, what's different right now is that psychological segmentation becomes often the predominant factor. And whatever it is that you do, you've got to find those who can do business now. And what I would suggest too is that it's hugely different right now than even 6 weeks ago. We've seen that in our businesses too, right? Where lots of people that were like on the fence, like, yeah, we'd love to do this campaign with you. And we're like, we're just not sure of the situation right now. Suddenly are like, they're emailing us saying like, hey, let's get going. We want to go, right? So that's really important. Brings us to number 6, pivot number 6, final pivot, which is know your soul, outsource everything else. And so one of the biggest challenges that we see for any company during a crisis, and the ones that the crisis conquerors master, is that there's a lot of distractions for your attention during a crisis, right? You're just trying to survive. You're just trying to deal with finance. You're trying to deal with investors if you have them and keep them, abridged of what's going on. You're just trying to keep sales coming in the door. You're trying to not lay off key people because it's really important to keep them and you're trying to find a way. So what I would recommend though is all of this creates a huge amount of distraction, right? From what is the core. So during a crisis, you've got to know your soul. What I mean by that is know your core. Know what it is that you do that no one else can do, that you must do well. You cannot outsource it. It is the critical component of your business, and know what that is. And then outsource to the extent you can. And if you can, and one, cost of outsourcing can come down because lots of companies or people need to do more business. Or if you can't pay for it, find a way to barter or trade or adjust or get payment terms for later or whatever it might be. But the crisis conquerors, the ones that become the market leaders, they know their core, they focus on it. And anything that takes away from that, right? If you're the one going over all of the finances and there's another person who's suitable to go over the finances because you got to focus on just like getting sales in the door, do that, right? So know your soul and outsource everything else. So put it another way, those who perform well in a crisis can focus on what really counts and put first things first, okay? And one bonus one is that leverage the moment to gain market share. So even after doing this, there's a momentum, and as you start to see the recovery happen, it becomes a game of billiards. It becomes that you can run the table. So as you start seeing the recovery happen, as you start feeling that momentum occurring, you've got to jump in, you've got to double down, you've got to go in head first. Because if essentially you can see those gains before other people do, then that's how you get that upward trajectory. So Daniil, I'll stop there with kind of like, before I get to my final thought of the day, and any comments or questions on what we've covered so far.
Yeah, there is one question. And everyone, please start asking your questions in Q&A section and raise your hand. We are almost done with the presentation, so we'll be able to speak with you. And those who want to ask the question with the voice, just raise the hand. I will give you an opportunity to speak. The question is, what do you think of current crisis in 2020? Like, what's the key opportunity and the key problem it brings? I mean, you mentioned some of that already, but sure. Can you just briefly?
Sure. I think one thing that is unique that I think about this crisis is essentially there's multiple crises in one. So you got first the health crisis, right, which is still ongoing. But then on top of that, you put an economic crisis, which stems from the health crisis, but it's its own issue, right, of lots of businesses having to sort of close down or shut the doors or put people on furlough. And then on top of that, you actually have a social and cultural crisis, right, which is all of the kind of unrest starts in the US, starts to spread around the world, related to important social causes. So all of those three kind of hit in sequence, which makes things very, very difficult. But some of the opportunity that I think results from that is that not so much that totally new fields have emerged, but that it's accelerated adoption of many things that would have happened 5 or 10 years from now, but instead are happening now. So most notably, remote work and all the tools related to remote work, right? These are things that almost, it's not so much whether are all companies going to be remote or in the future, or everything go back to normal? It's almost like it can't go back to normal because there's too many people now who have experience and companies who have experience that, you know what, if everyone works from home, we can still kind of get business done. It's okay. We don't have to worry that we can't see exactly what everyone is doing at every minute of the day. That's okay. So that's one area that is unlikely to, it doesn't mean offices are going away or it's not gonna go back to some element of that, but like anything dealing with remote work is a huge opportunity because we've just sped it up by 5 or 10 years, right? We're probably going that way anyway, but we've sped it up. Anything, number two, that deals with the stay-at-home economy. So things that you can suddenly deliver at home. And I don't just mean like an actual like food delivery, but anything, whether that's learning or entertainment or any industries like that, huge opportunity now. Third, actually, it's increasing the acceleration of digital marketing. It was already moving digital. Why? Usually because it's more trackable. You can measure it better. But because a lot of the marketing channels that were, you know, more physical, more event-based, essentially were taken off the table, lots more people became digital marketers, right? Those companies there. So if anything related to digital marketing, now is a great time to do that. So those are all opportunities. What I would also say is right now certainly is an opportunity for, as we talked about, research and development, asset accumulation, anything that essentially will give you a long-term advantage. If you can find a way to get them now, that's a huge opportunity as well. So hope that answers the question, Daniil, but I would say that those are key industries. And, you know, the other aspect of that is within your industry, you know, any segment related to those things also is an opportunity as well.
I agree, and I would add that it's also a new forming opportunity of forming freedom, new way of freedom, in my opinion, for people who used to work from the office. Now they don't have to be in the office. It's first thing, they can live wherever they want. And those people who were outside wealthy countries can use this opportunity to work remotely for great organizations like in Western Europe or States or wherever. It will be, I think, a change. It will change the world. So I think.
I think so. And actually, that brings up a good point, which is we're hiring. So if you're watching this and you're interested in what we do, you can go to topagency.com, which is just topagency.com. That's the website for Top Global, which is kind of our network of 11 different agencies. Or you can go to prhacker.com, which is a sort of our viral marketing and PR firm as well. And we're hiring. And so if there's folks out there, wherever you are in the world, I would even say this for our company, we were already very remote powered. Like we had systems and processes and procedures. About 30% of people work with us work remote, and now we're even more so. We're doubling down because we realize that there's really talented, creative, smart people all over the world, and we don't want location to be a barrier of working with us, right? It's like if you're smart, you're ambitious, you want to grow, you want to learn as fast as you possibly can. We don't care what your circumstance is. We don't care where in the world you are. We want to work with you. And I think more companies are starting to think like that because, to me, it's just like, it's just foolish not to, right? If you're like, yeah, we've got a great talented person, but we can't get, him or her into an office in New York or San Francisco. Therefore, they're amazing and smart and are a game-changing person, but yeah, they just don't want to live there, so we're not going to work with you. That's just foolish to me. Why would anyone do that? And I think, more companies will come around to that.
I completely agree with that, and you just proved my point. Thanks for that. Moreover, I can say that I'll give you the links to our community, and just feel free to post information about your company so people can potentially use your services. And also mention we have a separate group where you can actually just ask people, let people know that you're hiring.
Okay, absolutely. So one, Daniil, let me know those links and I will post there. And also, I should mention for anyone that wants to connect with me, kind of three thoughts. One, I always ask this question, which is on the screen now, which is, what is the one thing? and you can tweet at me at Benjamin Kaplan. Whenever I go to a webinar or a conference or a presentation, I learn a lot of stuff, and I'm trying to absorb it. And I know I'm gonna like understand at the time, I'm gonna forget a bunch of stuff. So I always focus on what is the one thing? What is the one thing that I'm gonna remember, I'm gonna apply, I'm gonna learn, the one thing of value? Because if I got one thing, then at least it was time well spent, right? I got more than I had. So I'm always interested to know what is your one thing. So tweet at me at Benjamin Kaplan, I'll respond. And I wanna know what is the stickiest part? What did you find most interesting? What was most helpful? That's number one. Number two, and this is a little networking hack. Daniil, I don't know if you ever use this. If anyone get out your smartphone, you pull up the LinkedIn app, and there's a little icon there that you see there in the search bar. It's a little QR code. If you click on it, it brings up two options: either display your QR code or scan another QR code. And this is a super easy way to connect with people on LinkedIn. I do this at conferences all the time. So my QR code is on the screen. If you get out your phone, open up the LinkedIn app, hit that little button, scan a QR code, just hold it up to your computer. It's gonna take you to my LinkedIn page. And if you then send me a network request, and I get a lot of requests, I don't accept all of them. So if you simply just write in there like, hey, heard you in Daniil's webinar, wanna connect, then I will accept, and we can connect, and we can be linked that way, and have a conversation that way. So I don't know if you knew how to do that, Daniil, but it's super helpful when you want to do this quickly at conferences. And I've learned that you can do this just with your computer screen.
Yeah, I agree. I use the QR codes all the time. That's a great idea.
Okay, awesome. So that's number two. And then finally, email address. If you want to connect with me, and email me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Also happy if you're interested in sort of marketing help or business growth help. That's my email address, which is ben.kaplan@prhacker.com. That's one of the agencies, kind of the fast one to get to me. I have many email addresses, but that one will get to me fast. ben.kaplan@prhacker.com.
All right.
And then other questions. I'm just looking in the Q&A. I see there's a couple open. I hadn't opened it yet. Do you want to answer those, Daniil, or are there others you want to get to?
There are a few people who raised their hand and want to ask with their voice. Do you mind we close the slide, or you want to keep it?
Let's do that. Here, I'll close the slides right now, and I'll stop the share.
Awesome. So we have a few people actually already. Let's ask Alina. Feel free to ask your question. You are now able to speak. Alina, you're on mute. Please ask your question. Ask to unmute. Just a second. Alina. All right, we're gonna give just a second. Disable talking. I'm gonna give Daria. Please ask your question. Please unmute yourself. Hello.
Hi there. Probably can hear me now. So my question is, like, you've been talking a lot about like new opportunities, but for me it always seems like you're talking or implying mostly about software marketing, like some of the like service industries which do work like with internet or can be done like from home. What is going to happen with the real sector? I'm a more real sector ambassador, so I work in real estate and I do have manufacturing facilities, and that's like, you know, here most of your supply chains were broken and on because you had one contractor. It's just like, you know, you break the whole system. And it seems for me, you know, either you need to, of course I have some diversification done, but it's just like, do you need to go and directly involve yourself in all those like new opportunities in way of like software engineering, which I have no clue about or like, you know, you still need to have the real sector remaining in your economy. Otherwise, everything is going to be, you know, blank. It's just like my, not sort of question, but like, what do you think about that?
Well, you know, I think that's absolutely true. And I didn't mean to give the impression of just sort of like, you know, things that weren't physical or businesses that can work right now. I think actually across the past 4 recessions, lots of those businesses, and for instance, I gave the example before of like these two office supply stores, right? Where essentially they're like physical businesses. They're moving stuff around. They have supply chains,
Sure.
like all of that. And still finding a way to either like the big three, which is like R&D, marketing, and asset accumulation, still are opportunities now. So is there some part of the business that can shift? I mean, you might deal like we see this across the restaurant sector right now, right? It's like, okay, people can't eat in all of our restaurants, but might we, for instance, there's a restaurant I know of in New York that they've become like a bottle shop, right? So like they were known for their wine collection. They never thought about like selling wine directly, but they couldn't quite have people in the restaurant yet safely. So they're like, okay, we're going to, monetize our wine collection. We're going to sell bottles, and we're going to try to, have a way that we can, and some of those places are for right now, they're like teaching cooking classes online, which they never thought they'd do either. So some of that is just survival. Some of that is just like find a way, and that's not your long-term business, and it won't be that. But then the other part of it is that, what I would say for those like kind of like physical businesses or your real world businesses is that, the one thing I'll say is, we're not going to go to a fully digital society. Like we're not going to be just like, we never see anyone. We just like interact on Zoom. So instead of that, there's going to be an opportunity that comes for those kind of real businesses. Cause there's a certain point where like, if all of our work time is spent remote in Zoom, our leisure time, we're going to want to like be physical with people, right? If everything shifts the other way versus we used to be like physical, at work. So then we want to like recharge at home. And now it might be the opposite. So there's always an ebb and flow. There's always an opportunity. And if things go too far on one side of the spectrum, there's an opportunity on the other. So I realize there's no easy answers, but we've got to figure out a way where are those physical businesses going? They're not going away completely. They just might be redefined a little bit. And how do you invest in the things that will lead towards growth? I don't know if that helps at all, Daria, but I do think the one thing I'd say is that when I talked about time shifting, being a little bit ahead of everyone else, that really matters in physical businesses, right? Like, so for instance, just use restaurants as an example again. The restaurants that realized this would be a problem sooner and like close down sooner were then able to open sooner, right? And to capitalize sooner or pivot to a more digital difference or deliver meals or do other things like that as well. So being real decisive and acting quickly, especially on those physical businesses, allows you to sort of like be ahead of the curve of everyone else.
Thank you, Daria.
Okay, great, thanks.
There is another Zainuf, just a second. Zainuf, please ask your question.
And
Hello,
Zainuf, I love the photo there. You're like doing business deals. You're like buying companies. Like that's kind of badass photo. I like that.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Daniel. Everything was great, Ben. I just want to say thank you, and I so appreciate it to Daniel and you're spending your time for everyone who's listening. And this general point, what you say about if you're smart, if you have ideas and you want to create and build something great, no matter where you are, we just need to do it. And thank you for this. Thank you for spending your time and sharing this idea of everywhere communication is possible nowadays. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comment, and that's very kind of you. And let me add one kind of point on top of that for sort of the crisis of sort of, I think like kind of just about sharing knowledge. And that is that I think, and particularly with the technological tools now, we sort of had this idea before that like, right, is like with like that knowledge was like, should be kept, right? That knowledge should be like, okay, this is what I have. This is valuable. I'm going to keep it. And to me is a remarkable shift. And I think a lot of this is due to the internet. A lot of this is due to digital communications, but it's like, there is so much value actually in sharing it and being open with that and doing that. And what is the value that's created? One, when you create, and that's why I encourage like everyone out there to like become a thought leader, share more things, share what you learn. When you're like, you have this aha moment, relay it to other people. Don't just keep it. And the reason I think that's valuable, and I try to do that, and maybe both of you do too as well, is that one, it sharpens your idea, right? So you got this idea and then you share it, it gets sharper, it gets better the more people give you feedback, or they're like, oh, I don't quite understand that, and you have to make it better. Two, what it does is if you deliver value, by definition, you're valuable. So why would you limit your value by holding that onto yourself? Instead, deliver value, become more valuable. So that's why sharing information is important. And then three, it actually people tend to bounce back things to you. So you share a lot of stuff, people tend to share with you. So now you give, but you also receive. And then on top of that, four, when you share information, usually people seek you out. When you become a thought leader, what happens is people are attracted to you. And so how many of you want to work or know or network with talented and smart and capable and skillful people? Probably all of us, right? So that's actually just, I'm sorry to have a little bit of a riff or a rant on a simple comment. But I would just say, I appreciate you saying thank you for sharing information. And what I would just say is that I think we all should try to share as much as we have. And I think there's fantastic value that's created. And I think more people ought to do that rather than hold on to things for themselves.
Thank you. I believe in same.
Thank you, Zain. And I wanted to add that this is what we actually do in our community. We keep sharing with people as much as we want, and people come from around the world and they start helping each other. This is amazing, really, and it works. What you just said exactly works. I completely agree.
Okay, awesome.
So we have more questions. Renat is, hi Ben, thanks for a perfect presentation. Here's the quick question to reply without taking time for thinking. Imagine you saw breaking news just now. Some troubles are coming and it will hit your business tomorrow. What is the first thing you will do just right away?
First, okay, that's a great question. And the first thing I do right away is I've got to understand the nature of the trouble, right? It's like I've got to accumulate as much information as I can. So one, I've got to understand it, number one. Number two, as you might tell from my approach, I actually don't think that problems or challenges or obstacles, I think there's very few that are like this is the first time anyone has ever experienced this problem, right? In my opinion. So my natural approach, much like I did for Pivot Don't Pause presentation, is let's go look at other examples of what people did, right? Let's understand the problem, number one. Two, let's not tackle this alone. Let's go look at what works. Let's go look at other examples. Three, tap into my network. So the fact that I've shared information, I've become a thought leader, I've tried to help others, then in my moment of need, there's other people I can go to. So who knows about this? And they don't have to know about this directly, but they may know someone who knows about that. So that's, number three. And then final thing is and I'm sorry, I think the question asked for one thing. This is my little 4-step process. But 4 is take action in small ways to have small wins. So you don't have to solve the problem right away, but what can you do to make your situation 3% better, 5% better? I think when there's a big challenge, especially a lot for businesses, we tend to be like, I need to find the magic bullet solution. I need to figure this thing that solves all my problems. Instead, let's try to make it incrementally better in small ways. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to a short question. But of those things, what is the number one thing I'd say? I would actually say this idea about you're not at it alone, that someone has experienced this before. Most problems and most solutions are not totally unique. And so you can learn from what other people do.
Thank you. We have Rod from California asking, thank you for the webinar. Could you tell your opinion about possible expectations of deferred demand in offline business, which are now in crisis?
So I think the question I think was a little bit related to Daria's comment about, what if you're in sort of like offline businesses and that, once we recover, there's gonna be, need for your business then, but there might not be need for your business now. So I think, one of the key things is, and the critical thing for those businesses is essentially being able to identify what stage you're in very, very quickly, right? Because your optimal strategy is essentially shifting over time. There's a time where you need to be very, very defensive. There's a time when you need to be very offensive. There's a time when you need to like balance the risk and reward and adjust. And things are changing so quickly. It could be like, wow, we're doing great with COVID-19 this week, and next week it could be horrible. So I think the premium for those kind of companies is understand where you are and understand where it's moving very quickly, and being able to make decisions very quickly, pivot very quickly, and be very, very decisive. And the only thing I would sort of add to that is that find a way to survive now, weather the storm, do whatever it takes, do whatever is required, but do so in a way that doesn't sacrifice the long term. So if you're like, you know, a physical business and you're like, yeah, you know, I could totally pivot and I don't know anything about software development, I'm just gonna like become a software developer, right? Probably not the optimal strategy. Just figure out creative ways to survive, to sort of survive to another day. And so survive, but then ideally, if you have this like Venn diagram, right, of two opposite things, you have like survive one side, and you have like invest in long term, and like where do those two things overlap? Or survival matches invest in long term, and wherever they overlap, do that.
Great. How much time do you have left so we can plan? I have more questions to ask you.
Okay, probably just you know, a minute or two left. So maybe like final wrap up question, and then I'm happy for anyone else to you know, my email again, ben.kaplan@prhacker.com, or Daniil, I'm happy. I see the links you posted where I'm happy to like engage in the community as well for follow-up things. So do you have your final, toughest, most challenging, most difficult question? I'm ready for it.
All right, so it's combined in two then.
Okay.
Basic one, like how to enter the United States market now when everything is closed and people work remotely, and people and entrepreneurs are trying to get traction in the United States. And the other part of the question is, you were talking about a psycho profile of a customer persona. What are the key questions to answer to build this profile, and how to do the customer persona description in B2B? What criteria to use?
Okay, sure. A couple of things. First, on the question about US, I would say, you know, US, you know, in many parts of the country, things are fine. In other parts of the country, it's like a tremendous hotspot, and it changes quite a bit, right? Like Florida and Texas and California were big hotspots, but then it's kind of like leveled off. Before it was New York. Now New York is better. You know, San Francisco was bad. Now San Francisco is better. LA is bad. So it kind of fluctuates. What I would say though in the US market is this is very noticeable, which is about, you know, April, May timeframe, lots of companies were like, yeah, we don't know what we're going to do. Everything got paused and put on hold, including many people that were about ready to become clients. They were like, all this happened in the world, we're just going to pause. All of those people have come back and have signed up with us. And that's across, and many of our clients too. So we have experienced in US market, I'm talking about, but also around the world too, that a lot of businesses that basically were purely defensive mode, as of June and July, were starting to shift, and their mentality started shifting. So lots of deals that we were doing that got held up are back. So I think in US, aside from the purely physical businesses that really like cannot open, all the other businesses that are there, I think, you know, if I was going to sort of look at the overall market, I'd say 90% in April or May are like, we're not doing anything. And then now I'd say, you know, probably 2/3, 3/4 of those businesses that we're not doing anything are actually back doing deals again. Doesn't mean they're doing every deal, but they're doing something. So I think actually it's a much better situation, especially in the US market, but also in a number of markets around the world. And again, I'm sort of saying the businesses that can still work in the current environment. I'm not sort of saying, you know, although I would say, you know, we've got a bunch of inquiries actually from restaurants and other things saying, you know, and physical businesses actually asking like, what can they do now? Because, you know, they still need to survive, and they want to do quick, easy things now to market to survive that are, you know, inexpensive but effective. And so we've gotten those inquiries too.
All right, and for customer persona in B2B? How would you?
Sure, we do it. We do a ton of that kind of work. I would say one thing that is really overlooked in B2B, this is just kind of a general thing, is understanding, and we're a branding agency, so we do this for a ton of like brand strategy for clients, which is understanding your defining moments. It's very important in understanding the defining moments for each of your personas. So here's what a defining moment is. A defining moment is that moment where your company or your brand or your product is at its highest value, where your customers would be like, I cannot live without your product, right? It is so essential to me that you know, I have to have it. It is so valuable that if you went out of business, I would be distraught because I love your product so much. And so the question is, how do you discover what that is? So let me give you an example from the type of B2B business, an actual client of ours, and how you find their defining moment. So one of our clients does third-party Oracle and SAP support. What I mean by that, if you know Oracle, SAP, they have these like really expensive $1 million databases, and you can either buy a support package from the company, or you can go to a third-party vendor who's going to support, you know, your expensive software purchase. So for those kind of companies, for their kind of company, they're, you know, typically if they message their product benefits, what do they say? They say like they're cheaper than other people. They say like, you know, there's better service because, you know, if you call up at the support line, they're going to know your name. It's not going to be a support, you know, line where you have to introduce yourself every time. And those are just features. Now, when we actually did stakeholder interviews, customer interviews, we looked at their positioning to find their defining moment. Here's what we uncovered. A lot of their customers actually said the moment when this brand had the highest perceived value was actually when, you know, they saw their support ticket queue go to 0. Meaning they had these support ticket queues for like Oracle and SAP database support that lasted for years, right? These questions that like never went away. Signed up with this company for 6 months, and then suddenly their ticket queue went to 0. That was the defining moment. That was the emotional reaction. It's like, and then when we saw that, we shifted all of their marketing to, you're not a company that does third-party database support. You're the company that gets to ticket queue 0. That is the defining moment. That's the emotional response. And when they started shifting their messaging to that, then suddenly the sales cycle got quicker. People took their calls. People signed up faster. They wanted to do better deals because that was the emotional truth, which was the defining moment. Was like, man, I didn't even think it was possible. You know, and Danilo, this is like, maybe you don't do database support, but this is like, you know the feeling when you get to like inbox 0 on your email, right? And like, you know, wow, I answered all my messages. There's nothing left, right? It's like, it's 0, it's empty. This was a feeling. And so when you found that defining moment, it shifted all of the marketing. It made everything easier. So that is one example. And I think more companies need to really deeply understand what are the defining moments when they are most valuable.
And that was Ben Kaplan with a great presentation about pivots. Thank you, Ben, for your great talk. We look forward to have another webinar with you if you will find some time for us. And I will email you all the links to join our community and connect with our global audience. And have the rest of the night, because I know that it's late. We all know that it's late in the States, and thank you for taking this time so late. We really appreciate that. Have a great.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. For everyone who watched today, tune in. I know it's harder and more challenging, easier said than done. The number one thing that I always feel great about is, as long as I am gaining experience, as long as I am learning whatever challenge I'm facing, I know I'm becoming better. So I'm investing in myself. That always pays long-term dividends. And so, and the final thing I would just say to end on, in addition to, one, email me, ben.kaplan@prhacker.com, prhacker.com or topagency.com or the website. So contact me there. The final thing I'd say is that all of this may sound daunting. It may sound difficult or challenging to pivot rather than pause in the right way. So don't try to solve it all in one day. Just try to get incrementally better. Get 2% better in the efficiency of your costs. Get 4% better in investing in R&D. Get 6% better in maybe improving your marketing. Get 8% better in accumulating some assets that are going to lead to both short-term and long-term gains. So you don't have to do all of this tomorrow, but I do think that small gains lead to bigger wins. And I think, you know, anytime there's disruption or challenge or chaos, it's an opportunity to accelerate your growth. And I think that's true today. So thank you so much, Daniil.
Thank you so much. This video will be posted on our YouTube channel. You may join our LinkedIn as well. I posted the links in the chat. And if you want to continue chatting with Ben Kaplan, I posted the link to Go Global World Chat on Facebook. Please just use the link, connect to this group, and we'll continue this conversation in there. Thank you so much, and have everyone a great day. Goodbye, Ben.
Thank you. Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.